Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the 2015 Hayes Watkins Lecture Series. My name is Wheeler Painter, and I am the student representative and chair of the Dean's Advisory Council for the Gordon Ford College. And I would like to introduce Katz. Since 2011, Dr. Jeff Katz has served as the Dean of Western Kentucky University, Gordon Ford College of Business. He is a full professor of management and former Fulbright scholar whose teaching and research focus on global competitors, strategic decision-making, and corporate governance. Dr. Katz obtained his doctorate from University of Florida's Warrington College of Business Administration. He is a past president of the Midwest Academy of Management and currently serves on the board of Academy of Management Perspective and the Mid-American Business Deans. With no further ado, Mr. Dean Katz.
Thank you, Wheeler. Wheeler Painter, the chair of our Student Advisory Council. It takes a lot of gumption to stand up in front of here. Give him a hand, would you? Thank you, Wheeler. Well, this event is sponsored and hosted by the Student Advisory Council of the Gordon Ford College of Business. I'd like to recognize the council members who may be here and our student ambassadors. Council members, would you stand? Ambassadors in front? We have some council members here from our Student Advisory Council. I know we do. I've seen you out there. There they are. Give them a hand. They worked very diligently on this event, as well as the reception we'd like to invite you to at 4:30 at the Alumni Center Ballroom. Please join us for a networking event. It is an honor to serve as your dean, and thank you for the work on behalf of our college. Thank you all for joining us on this kind of rainy and almost wintry afternoon. We're excited to have a nationally recognized expert in the energy industry joining us, talking about success and achievement. I've had the honor this afternoon to spend some time with Mr. Bill Johnson, and it has been delightful. He spent time talking about a range of topics that I know he'll cover today that will be just inspiring, enlightening, and I hope for your future beneficial. First, however, I'd like to recognize a few individuals who have made their way here today that have supported and do support the Gordon Ford College of Business and WKU. First of all, members of the WKU Board of Regents. We have two here today with us. I'd like to recognize Mr. Frederick Higdon and his wife Nancy. They're here in the front row. Thank you for being here. Mr. Higdon graduated from the Gordon Ford College of Business before it was the Gordon Ford College of Business and was hired by Gordon Ford to be an accountant, so he has a rich tradition. I'd like to recognize Mr. John Ridley, who's here with two of his partners from his practice. Mr. Ridley is here. There he is. Please stand. A WKU Board of Regents member, a friend and supporter, and his partners Derek Hull and Katie Stennett are with him as well from the Ridley and Hull Financial Services firm. Is Mr. Ernie Peterson here with us? I thought, there he is. I'd like to recognize the Kentucky District General Manager, Tennessee Valley Authority, Mr. Ernie Peterson. Thank you for being with us. We have a number of Business Executive Advisory Council members here. I'd like to recognize our chair, Mr. Chad Davis, that came in from Washington, D.C. to join us. Chad, a graduate of the Gordon Ford College. His vice chair of our council, Ms. Heather Rogers, who's here. Thank you for being here. And would all the council members that have made it here today stand and be recognized, please? I know that Dick Gladden's here, Dr. Capps is here, Mr. Vince Boucher is here. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and Mark Brothers is in the back, too. Thank you so much for being here. We don't do it alone. We're a student-centered applied college of business, and I'm very fortunate to work with the best leadership team around. Would our leadership team members, associate deans, and department chairs please rise or wave your hand? Rise if you would and be recognized. We have them over here on the side. We wouldn't have the Gordon Ford College if not for my friend, our former dean, and really a mentor. I'd like to recognize Dr. Bob Jefferson, who came in from Illinois to be with us. Dr. Jefferson, please, would you rise and be recognized? Dr. Jefferson's legacy is very strong. When I became the dean 4 years ago, a faculty member said, "You know, Jeff, you need to be more Jeffersonian if you plan to be our dean." And I've tried to do that every day. We have other faculty members here to support our students and our programs. I believe we have the best faculty in the country. They're certainly the heart and soul of the Gordon Ford College. Would our faculty members please stand and be recognized? They are the professors that teach our students every day. When we identified Mr. Bill Johnson as a possible visiting CEO for our speaker series that's funded and really in place because of Mr. and Mrs. Hayes Watkins, Mr. Mahurin was an instrumental person in helping us secure Mr. Johnson's commitment to be here. You have to understand that Mr. Mahurin was appointed to the Tennessee Valley Authority Board. He was unanimously endorsed by the United States Senate after being appointed by President Barack Obama. So we were pretty sure that by asking his CEO to be here, we would get a yes in the response. And sure enough, we did. We are really happy to have Mr. Mahurin here to introduce the CEO and president of the Tennessee Valley Authority. Mr. Pete Mahurin lives in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and is chairman of Hilliard Lyons Financial Services, a position he's held since 2008. He joined Hilliard Lyons in 1968 and has served in various capacities since that time. His reach and financial acumen across Kentucky and the region is very deep. He currently serves as a board member for Houchins Industries, Albany Bancorp, Sicilian Bancorp, Gray Construction, Jackson Financial, and the Governor's Scholar Program of Kentucky. Prior to Hilliard Lyons, he was a high school math and science teacher and graduated from Western Kentucky University with a degree in chemistry. Mr. Mahurin and his wife, Dixie, who is an academic advisor and a great friend of our college and our students as well, are ideal role models and supporters of our university. Please welcome Mr. Pete Mahurin to introduce our featured speaker this afternoon. Pete, please.
Real treat today with Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson, person accomplished all of his life. Tell you about it. Did hold or did hold scoring record last he played football. Joe Paterno, national champion. He is a distinct academic. Business career is stellar. He coached lawyer training, rose to become CEO of Progress Energy. That better? And there was almost a soap opera merger that occurred. His industry ended up, I guess, losing the first time. We obviously didn't let that bother me because too long after that he CEO Tennessee Valley. One of the things that's interesting him about him to me is he married the smartest one he could find. I would recommend that to all of you students. His wife was a psychiatrist, international reputation. He didn't meet her until he was in kindergarten. But to your students, I want to say this. You become your surroundings. Big part of your surroundings is your spouse. If you marry a dumb, you got a lot of Bill has all sorts of academic accolades. I have to tell you about 9 greatest academic achievements. Many times it's passed without telling this. I was top 3 of my class 3 consecutive years. Mine up grade 5th, 6th, 7th grade, top every year. Don't let the facts. The reason you have speakers like this is to let people what even
Thank you, Pete, for that kind introduction. And Pete and I share something in common, of course, that he also married the smartest woman he could find, Dixie. So it was a very kind introduction. When you know who Pete is and what he stands for him to say some nice words about you is truly a meaningful thing. So thank you, Pete. And thank you for the invitation to be here today. I suspect some of you are getting class credit for being here. I appreciate it nonetheless. No, it's really a great honor to come to the Gordon Ford College and be in the lecture series. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, you get an invitation to speak, and it's initially quite flattering. It feeds the ego in all of us. These people want to hear what I have to say. But then a couple days before you have to go speak, like earlier this week for me, you say, oh my goodness, I have to go give a speech this week. And to give a speech, you have to have something to say. Preferably something profound, at least interesting, and maybe substantive. So this is where I find myself at a disadvantage. Because although I've labored in the vineyards of government, politics, and industry for more than 30 years, and you know, during that time I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and I've said a lot. Most of it was interesting, some of it was substantive, and very little of it was profound. Just to be honest. This may come as a shock to you. I don't want to shock you youngsters, but this is the truth. The idea commonly promoted that CEOs or captains of industry or great entrepreneurs have great wisdom to dispense is largely a myth. And it's largely a sycophantic myth promulgated by your communication people or your shareholder people trying to drive shareholder value or something along those veins, or required to feed the psychological need of the leader in a cult of personality leadership. So ponder on that one a little bit. Why did we invite him to speak? There are exceptions. Obviously there are exceptions. Ford, Edison, Pete Mahurin, Warren Buffett, maybe Steve Jobs. But these are exceptions because most of us, mere mortals, are guided to our positions by a couple of other things. Luck, circumstance, a little bit of skill, a lot of perseverance, but mostly the work of others. You know Malcolm Gladwell, the guy with the big hair that writes the little books? Right, so Gladwell spoke to this well when he said, the biggest misconception about success is that we do it solely on our own smarts, ambition, and hustle. When the reality is that what we do as a community, as a society, for each other, matters as much as what we do ourselves. I think that's right. In fact, that might actually be profound. So now, I've revealed to you my own limitations on this topic, and as I thought about this earlier in the week, I thought I need to cast around for a subject to speak on. I could talk about TVA, Franklin Roosevelt's dream, and how it transformed this part of the world, and I'll be glad to answer questions about that later. I thought I might talk about the Soviet Union, Ukraine, ISIS. I thought maybe I'd restrict myself to something I knew something about and something of great interest to you. So I've decided to talk to your favorite topic, Anybody know what that is? What is your favorite topic? You. Right? So Abraham Maslow, decades ago, explained that for each of us, the most important person in the world is us. Now, we don't always like to admit that, but I think it is true. So let's talk about you. You know the old joke about the guy who's on the blind date? Are we allowed to tell jokes here? Yeah, okay. And he says, he talks about himself the whole time and finally says to his date, "Oh, enough about me. What about you? What do you think of me?" So I want to ask a couple of questions here, and I want to really frame my comments today to the students in the audience, although I think it will maybe resonate with everybody, but a couple of questions directly to the students. And the first one is a pretty good one. Why are you here? What are you doing here? Why are you at Western Kentucky? Why are you in the Ford College? What is your motivation? What do you hope to achieve here and afterwards? And when you think about that, what is your definition of achievement? When you begin or resume a business career, what does success actually look like? And when you end that career, how are you going to measure whether you were successful or not? So maybe we can start with some audience participation here. This requires you to participate if you missed that, right? So how many of you hope to engage or have engaged in business or commerce? Now this is a trick question. How many of you hope to engage in business or commerce? So how many of you are wearing clothes today? And where did you get those clothes? How many of you made them yourself? No, you engage in business and commerce every day. But if you're looking at it as a career, well, let's ask this one. How many of you aspire to leadership of some kind? Come on now, everybody aspires to leadership, right? How many of you hope to be successful? Yeah. How many of you hope to acquire wisdom? That's harder. I ask these questions for a reason. It seems to me that there are two main realms of enterprise, business and government, that have the most effect on each of us every day, business and government. Think about government, this is easy. Taxes, regulation, policy, law. The impact is clear, but is the same true for the business community? I think it is. Employment, retirement, finance, goods, services, products. I think there's a pretty good link here between those two institutions having the biggest impact on our daily lives. And of course, business and government share another commonality. Anybody know what that is? Well, if you look at the two lowest rated institutions in our country in terms of public trust, guess what they are? Government and business. How many business students are in here? Well, ponder this. You're held in lower regard than the lawyers. And for those of us like me who have dealt in politics, law, and government for 30 years, we ought to be worried about eternity, I believe. So, now, it's easy to understand people's feelings about government. I'm not going there, but I read the newspaper. So it's pretty easy to figure that out. But why are we held in such disregard and disrepute? Why is the business community held this way? I've thought about this a lot, and we have a lot of examples to think about, but I think the basic reason is we've gotten confused about achievement and success. We've gotten confused about value and value. We've gotten confused about ends and means. We've somehow gotten comfortable with the idea that achieving success justifies the means, and that we don't have to worry about the impact of our behavior on the human condition. What do you think? Is this possibly true? That's a pretty strong indictment, particularly coming to a business school and saying that. It's like going to someone's house and saying, that's a really ugly baby you have. But I really think this is what's happened. So one of the things that greatly interests me, and I think should interest particularly the students here, is this thing, motivation. Your motivation in thinking about a business career. Any psychology, psychiatry people in here? Oh, good, I can make this up and you won't know. So theories of motivational behavior. Why do we do what we want to do? So let's start with defining our term. A simple description of motivation: the force that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-directed behavior. So if you're thinking about a career in business, what is the force that drives your goal-related behavior? To paraphrase Ayn Rand in Atlas Shrugged, what is your motive power for being here? Anybody in here read Ayn Rand? You should read the Cliff Notes version. I was an English literature major, so I can say that. What is the motive, right? So some of you are here with no motive because you had nothing better to do. Why do I say that? Because that's how I went to law school, and that's how I got in business. I went to law school because I had nothing better to do. I had no motive, no motivation, and ended up somewhere pretty good despite that. But most of you are here for a reason. That motive, what is it? Could be a number of things. Employment, wealth, wisdom, knowledge, could be any of these. The simple point here, that motive is a product of your internal value system. What you believe the most, what you deem to be the most important. And your motive, driven by your values, will ultimately drive your behavior. Right? It makes sense to you? What you believe is actually what's going to drive your behavior. This is the way the world works. So recent behavior by those of us in the business community has put us slightly above Congress and below the lawyer. And it's not just in business that this happened. So you think about in recent years, I hate to pick on the academics, but the cheating scandals in the academy. There have been cheating scandals in our military academies, in our business schools, all over the place. So how do we get to this? The motive for this is pretty simple. I have to do well later. To do that, I have to do well now. Right? So the ends of cheating today justify the means of doing well later. Of course, you know the ends rarely justify the means. But I really think it's important for students or people starting in their career to think about this motive piece. What is it you're trying to achieve? What you do and what you're willing to do to become successful. I think you ought to think hard about this. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. And so knowing yourself and knowing your motive, why you're here and what you're intending to do, I think is important. Alexander Pope, a great 18th century poet from Britain, said this, know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. So this is about having a good understanding of your motive, because it will tell you a lot about yourself and what you are willing to do in life to become successful, whether you're confused about value and value. Now, of course, the broad goal in any career in business or anything is to be successful. Anybody here not want to be successful? Got up this morning and said, I hope to be mediocre today. No, that's not how we do this. So we have a definitional issue here. What does successful mean? So I'll give you some examples. Who's on Facebook in here? Yeah, everybody under the age of 60. See the movie, The Social Network? Anybody see the movie or read about it? So I don't know, Mr. Zuckerberg wouldn't be able to pick them out of a lineup, but half of what's in that movie is true. Would you call him a success? Oh, he's wealthy, he's well known. Is he successful? Steve Jobs, anybody read his biography? Same question. If half of what's in that biography is true, are we going to call him successful? Maybe successful, but you wouldn't want him as your sweet mate, I think is the answer. You know, in this country, the definition of success is often thought of in terms of the accumulation of wealth, power, and position. That's what we think. We also think some other funny things in this country. So we think that celebrities and movie stars are smart and meaningful because they have physical qualities that go on film well. You ever think about that? I mean, how else do you explain the Kardashians? Right? But we think some things in this country that just aren't. I also think this, and particularly to the students, you think achievement is going to be easy. How many of you think it's going to be easy? You've achieved a lot to get here. You're already well above the average in this society of intelligence, opportunity, and capability. You're probably in the 1% somewhere. So achievement, in a sense, is going to be easier for you than most. And the most significant limitation you're going to have is your own willpower, your desire to achieve, and your motives. And will that achievement make you successful? That's the question. So any physics people here? Anybody heard of Albert Einstein in here? Yeah, so Einstein was a pretty smart guy. And he said a lot of smart things other than E equals mc squared. Just remembering that c squared is a constant. That's helpful to you, I know. But one of the smart things he said, other than that, was don't try to become a man of success. Rather, become a man of value. So my point's simple here. I'm arguing for values and not just a value-based approach to business. There's a humanistic aspect to our capitalistic society that I think we have not attended to. One of my favorite authors is a guy named Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. And I recommend it if you haven't read it. And he said this: don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you're going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same is true of success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I think that's pretty good advice. President Obama at a commencement speech a couple years ago said this: the leaders we revere, the businesses and institutions that last, they're not generally the result of a narrow pursuit of popularity or personal advancement, but of devotion to some bigger purpose. Now, I think we have some economists in the room. I'm looking for the economists who are hiding, but I know there's some in here. And so I know what you're thinking. And maybe the nihilists in the room are thinking this too. John Maynard Keynes. We have to do what we need to do to be successful because in the long run we're all dead. Right? So that's sort of the antithesis of the values base. We're all dead. I will give you the contra to that, which is Hamlet's soliloquy, when he says, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long a life. And you know, our motives and our behavior in business every day should give us pause. Your motivation every day should give you pause. If you doubt this, ask yourself this simple question. Think of the economic turmoil and the human toll of the last 10 years in this country because of what happened in the economy and the financial market. Do you think that the business and financial people who led us to the brink of disaster ever paused to think of what dreams may come as a result of their behavior? Think they ever thought about it? I don't think they did. So I think what dreams may come, dreams of success and achievement, should give us all great pause every day. And nowhere should we take more pause than when we deal with other people. So I want to talk a little bit here about your interest in leadership, because this is really about people and your ability to interact with others. I asked earlier how many of you hope to be leaders of some sort. Many of you raised your hand. I will say that is a heavy mantle to don. So I'm going to make a prediction for the students here in the room. Here's a bold prediction. In the course of your career, you're going to have to rely on, work with, and enlist the help of others. How's that for a bold prediction? You're going to have to rely on, work with, and enlist the help of other people. And the better leader you are, the more willing these people are going to be to help you. Here's a second part of a bold prediction. Change will occur at an ever-increasing rate in your world. I think what's happened in my own business career, 30 plus years, the personal computer, the fax machine, when it was actually a fax machine. I don't know, you've probably seen this in the museum where the paper was heated and came off in a roll. Electric cars, hybrid cars, the collapse of the Soviet Union, the return of the Soviet Union, iPad, iPhone, iMac, all things social media. The world has changed dramatically in my 30 years. You're going to see that change in 5-year increments instead of 30-year increments. And so the combination of leadership and extreme times of change is a very challenging intersection that you're going to find yourselves at. So how do you deal with this? It seems to me the willingness to assume responsibility for personal leadership makes us better people and certainly improves our contribution to our enterprise. And that willingness is, I think, the best way for us to be able to deal with changing circumstances around us. So I am a lawyer by training. Lawyers like to define their terms, so let's define what we're talking about here. What does leadership mean? What is a leader? It's an easy thing to define. As a leader is a person who sets the tone or direction of an organization or enterprise through the exercise of power or influence. Right? Power and influence. The power part is easy. It's also the least effective way to do leadership because over time you make people order takers. So what we're really talking about here in leadership is your ability to influence others to some purpose. A political platform, religious, whatever it is, we're trying to influence someone to a proposition. And how well you influence others has a lot to do with, guess what? Your motive. Because here's the truth, people are smart. You hear all these concerns about people being not so smart, we can trick them in political campaigns. People are pretty smart, and they're hard to fool. If you try to fool them about your motives, you'll probably find out just how smart people really are. So, leadership, what does it look like in a business or any organization? How do we influence people to a proposition? That's really what we're talking about. It takes a couple things. I think the first thing is knowing what you're doing. And the second part is being mindful of how you do it. So knowing what you're doing, competence, that seems pretty obvious. One of the primary duties of leadership is to define the reality of your organization, your business, your enterprise, your entrepreneurial thing. What is the reality of it? You need to have a deep understanding of the mission and context of the organization so that your influence leads the enterprise in the right direction. Again, that seems pretty straightforward. Particularly if you have a bigger enterprise with a lot of people, you have to have a plan and a direction that's better than what you currently have. Because people are only going to respond to a future that's better than what they have today. So fundamentally to me, leadership depends on your ability to connect with other people, enlist the right people, and work the right plan. That seems pretty easy. Does that seem easy to you? Get the right people, get the right plan, behave the right way. Well, it's really not that easy. And if you doubt me, look at the dearth of leadership we see in this country at all levels. Political, corporate, you name it, we have it. So leadership really is about helping those around you seize the opportunities that this rapid change is going to bring. There was a smart guy who was a Stanford professor, John Gardner. There's two John Gardners who write books. This is the smart one. If you know the other one, you'll get that joke. He was in Lyndon Johnson's cabinet in the 60s, a great time of turmoil and change in the country. And he said, what we have before us are some breathtaking opportunities disguised as insoluble problems. And I think that's a good way to look at change in leadership. A time of opportunity for those who will step forward to influence people to give their discretionary effort to make things better. So I have a little experience in leadership space. I will say a couple things seem to me to make leaders most successful. First, the foundation of trust, truth-telling, and accountability. Trust, truth-telling, and accountability. Because without this foundation, any effort to change anything or make it better is not going to work. How many of you have ever had the audacity to say you're a change agent and you like change? Some people have said that, but you know what? They're kidding you. Because nobody really likes change. We are confident when we are safest, and we're safest when we are doing what we know what to do. And so generally, people are not going to adapt well to change unless they have trust and confidence in their leadership. So how do we generate that trust and confidence in other people? How do we behave so that people trust us and have confidence in it? And I think behave is the key word. This is the fundamental leadership question. There are two authors at Harvard who have been doing a study for about 20 years, Posner and Kouzes. They've asked the same question for several decades, thousands of people. What value do you look for and admire most in a leader? Anybody know what the answer is? What value or trait do you look most forward to in a leader? Same answer for the last 20 plus years. Honesty or integrity is the number one thing we look for in our leaders. Honesty in word, thought, and deed. So if you've worked around or been around a little bit, think about that. Think about what you respond to, or think about what employees respond to when they look at leadership. They notice how often you will give credit or take credit, which is a key thing. How do you react to mistakes, a bad mood? What do you as a leader measure is a key thing. Whose opinion do you value? And particularly, is there any contradiction between what you say and what you do? Now, how many of your mothers told you this growing up? It's not what you say that counts. It's what you do. That is one of the essential leadership lessons that you probably didn't know when she first told you that, but I think that's true. They want to know whether you're going to walk the walk after you talk the talk, or as these two Harvard authors say, what they're looking for is whether you embody what they want to become. It's a pretty good leadership standard, I think. So our own behavior, our own physical role modeling leadership is one of the key things we can do. You know, if you're in business or really in any kind of enterprise, one of the things you should seek every day is excellence. Excellence in your academics here, in your social relationships. And excellence is only going to come if you demonstrate certain behaviors consistently. I think Socrates or one of those smart old Greek guys had something to say about this. We are what we become, and excellence becomes a habit. So the only way you can do this is if people trust you. Another important skill, truth-telling. Tell the truth and tell it like it is, but do it gracefully with a plan to make it better. So I've had a little experience with this at my own time at TVA. I don't know, anybody here heard the term due diligence? Well, I hadn't done all the due diligence I should have before I got there. And so I didn't know with any great clarity that our biggest customer was leaving 5% of the load and 8% of the revenue. I sort of heard about that, but hadn't really focused on it. And then I learned that we had increased our spending $1 billion a year and lost $1 billion of revenue a year. That was my incoming president. And I think Pete had some of the same experience when he joined. Some things that we didn't know. I should tell you this about the TVA business model. Our job is to break even every year. It's a not-for-profit enterprise. So can anybody in the business sector here tell me how you can spend $1 billion more, make $1 billion less, and break even? Doesn't seem like a very sustainable proposition. So what do you do about this? I come into the organization as a stranger, an outsider, and I learn these, what seem to be very relevant facts that either no one else seems to know or no one else wants to talk about. And so your instinct here is to go up to people and say, what the hell were you thinking? You know, what were you doing? That doesn't work, right? So you have to go up and say, look, we've had a change in business circumstances. We have to change the way we do things. It's going to impact some of you, but let me tell you the truth about this. And sometimes the truth and the realities are scary. That's a pretty scary set of realities. But the only way to build trust and confidence in that situation is to tell the truth. And then to find a way to dispel the fear that comes with that scary truth. Anybody here ever heard of the Gallup organization, Marcus Buckingham? If you're into reading these kind of things, Buckingham is worth reading. Actually, there are only like 4 business books worth reading. And at the end, if you want me to tell you what they are, I'll be glad to. I get a royalty on none of them, but Buckingham said this: great leaders transform our fear of the unknown into the confidence for the future. And that's really our task as leaders every day. That's been my task at TVA since I got there. Say, we've had this massive change, it's going to cause some upheaval. In the end, we're all going to be better off. And so my last point here on leadership, accountability. Another great effective pillar of leadership. So what does this mean, accountability and leadership? Let me start with this proposition. Leadership is not about you. And it cannot be about you. If you aspire to leadership because you think it's about you, you're in the wrong space. You will not be successful with this. An effective leader understands that his or her influence is most effective when it's used to serve and motivate others, not to serve oneself. It's not a solitary endeavor, it's not a solo act, and it's not about you. On the other hand, of course, it's entirely about you, right? As the leader, you're accountable for the behaviors you use and the results you produce. Accountable for the choices we make, consequences of those choices, and we're accountable to be the best in ourselves and in our obligations to others. And oftentimes it seems like this. Leadership and accountability seems like you're accountable to yourself and for everybody else. Just so. That's the way it goes. So, leadership skills, how do we cultivate them? There's a couple. First, recognize you all have the potential to do this. Everybody has the potential to exhibit and display leadership skills. Let's take Michelangelo. Michelangelo, people actually thought that he could see the figure in the marble and he would just unleash it. And this was a myth, and a myth he propagated, of course. But here's what he said about it. If people knew how hard I worked to get my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. And I think the same is true about our own leadership development. It's up to us to unleash the talent and the skill that may be lying within ourselves so we can get more of that out of others. So Michelangelo persevered. He perfected his skill. He made a couple of pretty good statues. And I think we can do the same thing. And the results are worth it. Second thing about leadership or any of this, it's a continuous and continual learning experience. That's why one of the reasons I like to come to colleges and schools and remind you that you're not done when you leave here. Learning the principles of leadership easy. You can read the 4 books and you'll have them all. Putting them into practice on a daily basis is what counts. Making a conscious decision to learn every day from what you do and how you do it. You know, I often think about professional or college athletes. Your football team plays once a week and practices 5 days a week. How about business leaders? What do? We play every day, right? That practice time is important. So we actually have to think about ourselves as incomplete objects that need to continue to study and get better. One of my favorite poets, and I know one of yours, William Butler Yeats, once described education not as the filling of a pail, but a lighting of a fire. And I really think that's how we need to think about leadership. Filling our hearts with a lifelong desire for wisdom and the determined to make ourselves better. There's a great story about this if you're a historian. Franklin Roosevelt, shortly after he was inaugurated in his first term, went to visit Oliver Wendell Holmes. Now, if you're a student of the law, you'll know that Holmes is probably our most intellectual justice ever. Roosevelt came in, and there's Oliver Wendell Holmes reading Plato at age 92. And so the president said, "Mr. Justice, why are you reading Plato?" And he said, "Mr. President, to improve my mind, of course." I think there's a lesson there for all of us. If our greatest intellect of this country is reading Plato at 92, perhaps we can think about continuous and continual improvement ourselves. So let's study and let's practice. Let's turn leadership behaviors into habit. Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do, so excellence is not an act, but a habit. How many of you know who Shaquille O'Neal is? So you remember when they used to call him the Big Aristotle? Why they called him that? Because he kept practicing his free throws. He read this quote and he said, well, if I just practice them, I'll be able to make them. So he called himself the Big Aristotle. Pretty good trick. He still couldn't shoot a free throw to save his life. So maybe the last piece of advice here I'll give you is this. Thinking about the future, regardless of what you want to do, the most important thing is job fit. Doing something you like. Look, when you leave here, you're going to spend a long time working in the vineyards. And it's a lot more fun if you do something you like, and you'll be a lot better at it. So don't settle for second best. I always think this is like the old saw about trying to teach a pig to sing. You know, it doesn't work and the pig doesn't like it. So don't sweat it, find the right thing, and take your time. You know, it may not appear immediately. Don't worry too much about what the next step in your career is. Let things unfold. The key thing is do what's best. That's right in front of you. Why do I say this? That's my story. Here's my story. I was a middle school teacher, a basketball coach, went to law school by mistake and ended up as the accidental CEO. Do you know how much of that I planned? I spent my entire life planning to be a dentist. So here I am. Don't sweat it is what I say. So, you know, it's fashionable for every generation to cast aspersions on the next. Because, you know, as a child, I had to walk uphill to school 6 miles each way with the snow up to here. And you know this story. And it's quite fashionable to say that your generation is somehow less than mine. The world's going to hell in a handbasket, and you're the reason. I don't know, you ever hear old people like me say this? I'll tell the truth. You do. One of the reasons I like to come to places like Western Kentucky and see you is because it immediately dispels that myth. The truth is you are better educated and better prepared than me and my generation ever were. To see bright-eyed young students who are going to go out and light up the world is a great thing. You know, it's just wonderful to see this. The biggest obstacle ahead of you is yourself, is your motive. I always like to think about the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. Right, so think about that. Think you can. Your motivation, your values, and your ability and willingness to make contributions in leadership space are what's going to take to tell the tale for you. So instead of complaining about this generation, since I have 2 daughters, isn't it? I thought I might leave you with this. One of the things I recommend to everybody, business students, chemistry majors, read Shakespeare. If you want to understand the human condition, read Shakespeare. So I will leave you this from Julius Caesar. How many of you have read Julius Caesar? It's one of the great ones. So you know the scene. Brutus and Cassius are talking about the battle. Mark Antony is massing his armies. Brutus thinks their army might be a little tired. Cassius wants to lay down and get a little rest. But Brutus wants to convince him that this is the time to strike. And here's what Brutus says. There comes a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and in miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our venture. So I really hope you catch the tide at the flood, which will lead you on to fortune. And I hope you take the current as it serves and rise to success. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Any questions? Questions? All right, I'll tell you a lawyer joke as you think about questions. A woman went to a lawyer and said, "What's your lowest fee?" And he said, $100 to answer 3 questions. And she said, "Doesn't that seem a bit high?" And he said, "No, what's the 3rd question?" So I got to have at least 3 questions. Question. Yes.
How do you find
So here's the question. I talked about the rapidity of change, and it is much faster today than it was last year or 10 years ago or 20 years ago. How do you find the confidence to deal with it? And the short answer is you don't have any choice. Right? I mean, you can't actually stop. I think the real question is, how do you deal with it most effectively? So there's a couple of things here. Figure out what's important. One of the things I learned early on, there's a big difference between what's interesting and what's important. So you may have 10 things in your business that are interesting, but there's only 2 of them that are important. So the ability to differentiate interesting and important, I think, is a key skill in all enterprises. Second, be flexible and adaptive. Don't stick to the, what did Lincoln say in his second address to the Congress? The dogmas of our past are unable to keep up with the current situation. So you have to think, you have to free yourself from all the structures you've clung to in the past, which is really hard, because what are we most comfortable with? Right? What we know. So this is like a key question. Get good help. Find people who live in a world of more rapid change. Those of you who are students here, are much more adept at this than people like me, right? Because you experience it every day. As you can tell from this answer, there isn't a great answer. But you have to either adapt or die. That's the nature of all things. That's a little harsh. I think that's the way it goes. Good question. So, there's a whole cottage industry in leadership books. So you go to work for McKinsey or one of the big consulting firms, you find a client, do a study, write a book. Anybody ever observed this? So if you read nothing else and you're interested in this space, Drucker's Principles of Management, about 1955 or 56, everything else is derivative from that. So if you're going to read one thing, read that. If you're going to read 2, Drucker's Effective Executive is number 2 on the list. Number 3 is Collins' first book, Good to Great. If you're a strategic planning, a strategy person, Collins' strategy book, which is a little more academic, will take you like 10 trips to Starbucks to get through it, is a great book. There are 2 I would add. The first emotional intelligence book. The first one, they say the same thing after the first one. There's a book called Good Boss, Bad Boss by a Stanford professor whose name will come to me in a moment. And the last one is Marshall Silverstein's What Got You Here Won't Get You There. So take a subset of those and start there, and you still have to go to class. You don't know how intimidating this is for someone like me. You know, I end up as a CEO of several large enterprises. I'm with a business school faculty, and I've never had an accounting course, a finance course, a management course. So you wonder how I did this. Me too. Yes, sir. How much time do I spend fishing the tailwaters at TVA? Not enough. A little bit about TVA. You know, TVA, born in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt. The initial issue was controlling the Tennessee River from flooding. And so we have jurisdiction of the Tennessee River and all its tributaries up into Virginia and North Carolina. Below those most northern dams, the trout fishing is spectacular. On the Holston and the Watauga, those are 2 of the top 4 trout fishing waters in this country. And we'd love to have you come and experience that. You got to buy a fishing license and spend a little money in our communities. That would be good. Spectacular fishing in the TVA water. Any fisher people in here? Oh, yeah. Yes, sir. How do you do it? So the question is, how, as a mere attorney, did you end up as a CEO? Well, first, I will tell you this. I don't know anybody here thinking about going to law school. If you're thinking about it, go. Even if you don't ever become a lawyer. Because you learn a way of thinking and a set of problem-solving skills that are valuable no matter what you decide to do. So a legal education is worth it, even if you don't want to be a lawyer. Lawyers have, be careful with this, we have some skills, and that should be one of them. I was so fortunate. I went to a law firm that represented only utilities. And so I represented utilities. I had a person in a utility who took an interest in me. So this is a story about mentoring, who said, I think you should come from the law firm and work over here. And then I had a series of opportunities that people created for me. Remember that Gladwell quote I said, this wasn't about me, this was about people helping me. And I hate to tell you this, but it's also true. One of the keys to corporate success is outrunning your mistakes. So let me explain this. Typically, if you make a decision, it doesn't show up until year 3. And I had 5 jobs in a row that lasted 2 years. Honestly, this is the truth. And so, you know, I'd go, and my successor, something would explode in year 3, and I would say, I can't believe you let that happen. So, luck. I've thought about this a little bit. You know, what's special about me? Because we all are our favorite topic. There's nothing particularly special about me. But there was a lot of special people that helped me. So if you get the opportunity to ever do that for anybody, take it. Mrs. Mahurin. What did I learn as an athlete? I learned a couple things. I learned this. This may not be true, but I believe it to my core. At the end of the day, no matter how hard it gets, I'll be standing. So this resolve piece. And you know, no matter what you do, you're going to have challenges. Not everything is going to go right. you can bat like 600 on your decision making, you end up as a CEO. I mean, stuff happens. So your own personal resolve, resiliency, that you can't underestimate that, understate that. And the second, I would say, teamwork, how you operate as a group. You know, modern business is all about teamwork. And so you learn a lot, particularly playing football, particularly as an offensive lineman. You know what they say about football players? They put the athletes on defense, and the smart ones go on the offensive line. I don't know if that's true, but I like to think it's true. But teamwork, how you get along with others, how you rely on others, probably the two. Yes, ma'am. Do I think there's going to be an expansion of international competition? I was in Spain last week. This is a bad example, but we're in Kentucky. I was in Spain and I went to a number of restaurants that had bars. I was in the restaurant. But I looked at the liquor shelf. And guess what was on every liquor shelf in Europe? Kentucky bourbon. And so we're not only going to see more of this, we're in the midst of this. The idea that the world is not totally interconnected is wrong. Just look at the currency movements, the dollar versus the pound versus, oh yeah, this is going to get worse. I don't know if that's the right word, but what it's going to do is put a premium on education in this country, right? Because now we got everybody who's trying to have what we have, and we're not the best competitor in the world. So I think you have many advantages that people my generation didn't. You are smarter, you're better prepared. The world is a lot smaller for you. You got some challenges because no longer are you competing against my daughter. You know, you're competing with that billion people in East Europe who got free when the wall came down and want what you have from this country. And I think that will make life interesting. Good question. Any international business people in here? Yeah. Good place to be. Yes, ma'am. One core value I try to abide by every day, integrity. So here's my job. I have 11,000 employees. My job is to get the most work out of them every day that I can. And so how do I do that? I got to make them trust me. I have to give them a reason to trust me. And the only way you can do that is to say, here's what I'm going to do, here's why I'm going to do it, and then do it. So that, for me, is it. Trust, confidence, integrity, that whole piece. Because every day, you think about this in human interactions, every interaction is transactional. You ever think about this? They're not casual things, they're transactions, and you're drawing a conclusion in every one. Can I trust you or not? That's the way the world works. So that's the one I focus on. High integrity, trust, confidence. I try to be nice, too. I wouldn't underestimate the importance of being nice. Yes? That's an easy one. What's the greatest contribution I have made? I have two daughters, both of whom are, one's a MD, one's a PhD, highly accomplished. But you know what? I'm proud of. They're nice people. They're good people. That's probably the thing I'm most proud of. Good girls. Proud of them. One of them needs a husband. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Oh.
Well, I have something for you on behalf of the Gordon Ford College of Business faculty, staff, and students. We'd like to thank you for being with us. This has been marvelous.
Oh, thank you.
We will be here for a little while longer, and I'd like to all invite you to the reception at the Alumni Center at 4:30, where he'll be there another 2 hours, we hope, to enjoy some hors d'oeuvres and snacks, conversation. Please, on behalf of
Thank
the
you
Gordon
so
Ford
much.
College of Business,
Thank you so
we
much.
appreciate you being here. You
I
can
enjoyed
open
it.
that up, too.
Ah.
We'll There you go.
Ah, Hayes Watkins
A
Business.
memento for the Hayes Watkins
There you
program.
go. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.